All right, folks, finishing up chapter 15, this time around talking about electronic equipment and its use in radio production. So, as far as the equipment goes, equalizers. An equalizer alters the frequency response of an audio signal. In other words, it helps in bringing out more or less certain pitches of sound, the lower end, the mid end, the high end, all that can be manipulated using an equalizer. So it can boost or cut down those certain frequency ranges, and the effect winds up changing the character of an audio signal, making something sound more full. For example, if you increase the lower sounds or decrease the higher sounds, and vice versa if you want something to sound a little more crisp and clear. A graphic equalizer allows you to set a graphic representation of the response curve that you would like to create. This is one of two different types of equalizers that you may come across. This basically would kind of show in such a way that it almost looks like a bell curve, if you will, and you can adjust the curve through the software in your digital audio workstation. A parametric equalizer allows you to select one frequency and boost or cut just that frequency or that and surrounding frequencies. You can accomplish this by choosing the range above and below the selected frequency you want to equalize using a bandwidth control. And this is really helpful in isolating a certain frequency value as opposed to a frequency range. And this is really helpful if you're trying to isolate out sound at a certain frequency, I should say. A lot of times if you're trying to eliminate a hum or machine noise or something like that, that would be a really good use of something like this. A low-pass filter will chop off selected high frequencies that allows lower frequencies to pass through, whereas the other way around, a high-pass filter will cut low frequencies. And that might be something where you're trying to get rid of a rumble or some wind noise or something like that. In general, a noise gate can act as a filter where there's no audio signal in the circuit by eliminating a certain frequency and preventing noise from passing through the circuit. A good example of that might be to eliminate noise from maybe a nearby air conditioner or something like that. Compressors and limiters. A compressor shrinks the dynamic range of the audio signal. Basically, what that means is that when you compress the audio, you are trying to take low volume parts and increase the volume on it, while more high volume parts may get lowered. The result is to make the audio level more consistent throughout the piece, although some of the dynamic range of the music will be reduced. This is something that is used quite a bit in spoken word. If you're trying to present audio in such a way that the levels are going to be appropriate for transmission over radio. If someone gets way too soft, for example, when they speak in a whisper, you can bring that volume level up without impacting some of the other audio that's in the more normal range. Some compression variables include attack time. This is the length of time it takes for the compressor to kick in after a particular sound affects it. So in other words, there might be a certain number of thousandths of a second before the compressor actually kicks in once it realizes it needs to kick in. Release time would be the length of time the compressor takes to let the signal return to its previous level. So kind of the opposite sort of thing. There's going to be you can think of it similarly to latency in that regard, that there's a little bit of a delay from when the compressor needs to kick in or turn off from when it actually happens. And many times you can set what the attack time and release time is in your digital audio workstation. A limiter is a compressor that restricts high volume noises or transient peaks in music and has a high ratio of compression. Limiting is useful for keeping sudden loud sounds from overmodulating the signal. Many times in digital editing software, you will find this called a hard limit feature. In other words, you can use that feature to increase certain parts of the audio, but Price is Right rules, it doesn't go over a certain decibel level. And that can be effective for certain purposes. Some effects processors, reverberation. This creates multiple blended repetitions of sounds that add depth to the original sound. And there's various types of reverberation, including echo. This is a distinct delayed repetition of a sound. Chorus effect is a recirculated sound with a short delay between the original and the delayed signal. And flangers allow you to create a mirror image of a sound and then shift it slightly. This throws the two sounds out of time and creates various effects that kind of sound rather interesting when you put them in. Some people describe it like water rushing through a voice. But there's all sorts of different effects that you can use with flange to create a different type of sound quality as opposed to just the natural vocal sound. Spatial enhancers produce a signal that gives the impression of having greater presence or a larger spatial environment. The intent is to reproduce more detail in the music, giving it a more natural sound. So this might be some of the things that you would use to try to create a crisp, clean sound into something that sounds like it was more in a concert hall, for example. Encoders and signal processors used to deliver surround sound or provide alternative audio. This would be things like director's commentaries on DVDs, alternate language soundtracks, things like that. Some techniques that are used in production. Reverb can play a key role in providing depth and giving a sonic character to sound when you're looking for a certain quality to what is being heard by the ears. Echo, when the reverb time differs from the original sound enough for the ear to distinguish them as separate sounds. So you hear the original sound, you hear the echoed sound, and you can kind of think of them, at least your ears think of them, kind of sort of as separate entities. Reverse boomerang effect. This is playing audio backwards. The effect, when used sparingly, can add surprise, eeriness, and disorientation for the listener. A lot of times in modern songs that are played on radio, they will sometimes take obscene words and they will put that boomerang effect on that particular word so that technically they're not cussing over the air. Forward or reverse echo. Well, with forward echo, the echoes appear before the original sound and lend excitement. So kind of different from what we normally think of echo. Pan-potting, also known as channel bouncing. This technique takes full advantage of stereo's unique ability to capture the attention of a listener who is not expecting an announcer's voice or musical instrument to move from one location to another within a spot. So making that sound kind of move in progression from, say, perhaps just from the left speaker to when you hear it into both speakers and then you hear it just in the right channel, or vice versa. Changing pitch, raising or lowering the notes of speech in music. You can change pitch with or without changing tempo to give that real bass bottom sound or that chipmunk sound if you desire. Double tracking involves recording a voice and then altering a copy of that narration on the second track, perhaps by equalizing, adding reverb, slightly delaying a copy of the original, or changing the pitch slightly. So that's basically kind of a copy and paste of one track into another track and then altering that second track in some way, shape, or form. Gating attempts to make the sound dry or crisp when you're trying to remove certain elements of the sound to make it sound like it's not adulterated in some way. And then there's all sorts of other effects like stuttering, normalization, all sorts of other things that you can do. It's kind of a fun experiment to go through your digital audio workstation and look at the different effects that are available. Play around with them to see what you have at your disposal. Speaking of disposal, we can now dispose of Chapter 15. No, not really. You still have to turn in your notes and your study questions. You still have to show up for class. You still have to have scintillating conversation on the topic. Bring your questions, bring your comments, and we'll engage when we get together.